Bigger than capes.
Give me some insights.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it, and then I watched it.
Oh, dry.
Hello, welcome to Bigger Than Capes. I'm Zach, and I'm joined today by the writer of The Vein, Knock 'em Dead, Bleed Them Dry, and many others that I'm sure we'll get onto, Eliot Rahal.
Thank you so much.
Eliot Rahal.
I appreciate that. I was debating whether or not I corrected you, so that's nice. Hi.
Hi, it's good to meet you. How are you in this weird time to be alive?
I'm overall very good, very lucky, very fortunate, very blessed. I do live in Minnesota, so like the winter has we're at the long, angry part of the winter, which sucks. But overall, I have nothing to complain about other than like searing existential dread and like a sort of like time malaise almost. But not too bad. How about yourself?
I can definitely relate to some of that. I think existential dread it's really all the rage at the moment, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I feel because you're UK, right?
I am, yeah.
Right, and I don't know where you live, but I know it's bad over there, and I know you all got smaller apartments over there too, so that's got to be a challenge.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of being cooped up inside, which isn't great. I'm sure you're aware of that kind of thing, but
it's hard.
Yeah, and I miss going outside,
Mm-hmm.
and I miss comic book shops. I think that's right at the top of the list. Friends, comic book shops, and just being outside in general.
Yeah. Well, hopefully soon. Hopefully.
Things can only get better.
Let's keep it that way, yeah.
Let's go for the positive. So, only a couple of days ago, you've had a new announcement about a new project, Hotel Diablo. And what can you tell us?
So Hotel Diablo, I teamed up with my friend Ryan Cady and Machine Gun Kelly with Z2 Comics to create a graphic novel sort of inspired by Machine Gun Kelly's latest work. Machine Gun Kelly, for those listening, if you're not aware, he is a very, very popular musician. And he, I'll say this. He's had a really interesting. I didn't mean to talk about pop music for a while, but it's just like, he has made an interesting jump with his music style in the past year and a half, which has been cool. Because I was more familiar with him as a rapper and sort of like hip hop and sort of also like anthem-y kind of music. He reminded me of Eminem / Andrew WK kind of.
Yeah.
And now he's like doing this really interesting punk phase. Or I don't know if it's a phase. I don't know if phase is an appropriate word. Or if it's a kind word. But he is doing like a kind of sort of LA post-punk right now. Or I don't even know how to define it. But he's doing something that is not what he was doing. Which, as a artist, I always appreciate that, right? Like,
yeah, of course.
I truly always appreciate that. So, but his album Hotel Diablo, it's kind of based off of that, and this is an anthology, and basically, the story behind it is that like Hotel Diablo is sort of like a crazy spiritual place or whatever, and it's run by this like sort of enigmatic figure named the Concierge, and it's really like all told through the anthologies of several different characters, and the through line story is about like the first day of somebody's job at the Hotel Diablo, and the whole story kind of goes into function and of what the Hotel Diablo does, and the book is really written for his audience, in the sense that like Machine Gun Kelly's audience is a very similar audience to, I would say, I mean, it's not the same. Don't get me wrong. I know a bunch of people are going to climb down my throat for this. But it's, it's sort of not an MCR thing. It's totally different, but it's like those are the same kind of people who gravitate towards his music, and so we're writing stories for them, and we're writing stories for like Gen Z kids. Like I would say the main difference between MCR fans and MGK fans are absolutely age, right? Like MCR fans are definitely at the youngest 26, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I would say that's fair. I would say at the oldest, 35, 36. Right, middle-aged men and women.
As a 30-year-old MCR fan, I feel like I am right in the middle of the demographic you've just put me in. So yeah,
I'm 33 in a couple days. I'm an MCR fan, right? So whereas MGK, I think it definitely skews younger. And so we're telling stories for those kids. I got younger brothers, and we're talking about. In this book, we're talking about like identity and like hopes and dreams and like how things don't work out. We're also talking about like characters who do bad things. And some of these characters are people we condemn, or we don't condemn them, but we watch their stories condemn themselves. And some of these characters we try to redeem, and some of these characters we try to move on. And it's like dealing with pain, it's not super. It is a little melodramatic. It skews horror. It definitely skews horror. It definitely skews like intensity. But like it's also like we're just trying to talk about the big kind of hurt things, and really kind of speak towards that emotional core, because it's like that was a big thing I have trouble dealing with and had trouble dealing with throughout my 20s and into my 30s, which has led to several mental breakdowns. But it's just like I didn't deal with trauma, right? Like I'm fortunate I've had trauma, but like it's easier for me to deal with trauma that's inflicted on me. It's more difficult for me to deal with the wounds that I've given other people, right? And that's where a lot of this is coming from for me, I think. And it's like a fun variety of stories. And Ryan's a great writer, and Machine Gun Kelly has been great to work with. He's a crazy guy, but I got to tell you, like the guy's got passion, man, and he gives a shit, and he's really equitable. I'll say this: he's generous. He really he got really worked up. He wanted to make sure that he was giving Ryan and I our proper credit, and I don't expect anything from him, right? In the sense that I'm getting paid to do a job. I'm a professional. I'm going to come in and do my job. I'm going to take him seriously and take the material seriously. But that's what my job is. It's there. It ends there for this particular story, just because that's the parameters of it. And Machine Gun Kelly, he really went out of his way to make sure that we felt heard, and then also were seen and lifted up. So I got nothing. It's been a wild experience, but it's been a fun one.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm looking forward to seeing how it turns out, and I do love a good anthology book, so It sounds really cool. And I think you've, over the last few years, done quite a lot of different kinds of horror, which appeals to me, and so does this. So I am looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's pure accident,
Yeah. Do you know roughly when it's due to come out, or?
No, I have no answer. Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm really bad at that stuff. So
it's often the way that you just don't know. That's fine.
Eventually, how about that?
That's a good enough time frame for me. I've heard worse threats than eventually, I think.
Yeah. Oh God. But yeah, it's been great. It's been a great process, and everyone at C2 is awesome to work with too.
That's really cool. I am looking forward to it, and I hope eventually comes sooner rather than later.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
So, there's quite a few books you've got ongoing at the moment. Is this?
Well, I don't know if they're ongoing. Everything I'm doing is a mini-series, but
yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean that's too much, and then on top of that, doing more. I actually had to slow down, and I'm taking the last couple months to sort of reassess my approach, because I was definitely getting some burnout. But it's just like when you're working freelance, the whole goal is like break in and then break in again and then break in again and then like break in so much to where like, okay, now I'm like, oh, holy shit, like I'm working all the time now, right? But it's like you're shoveling coal into the engine, and you don't know how to say no because you've never been in a position to say no. And then you also don't know what's coming down the pipe next in 4 or 5 months. And like so you always say yes, but it burns you out. And so I'm in a fortunate position right now to like slow down and sort of pull back a little bit and pick my battles a little bit more. So it's kind of where my headspace has been at.
That's cool, and that's a good place to be, I think. And I
again, very privileged, very lucky to be doing that. So yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I love a good miniseries. I think sometimes comics are better when they're finite and there's a set amount, and
it's
things can come from that.
It's my preferred way to read them, honestly. I mean, like even with don't get me wrong, like the legacy runs are incredible, but like I am a space cadet, right? And like I don't have a car, and like it's hard to get to the comic book store every Wednesday. Come on, like every Wednesday, come on, like it's hard. And like so ongoing series is, although some of them have been incredible, like I mean, I was reading Invincible when it came out and stuff like that, and Walking Dead and like a few Marvel books here and there. But it's like, man, once you miss it. Oh, and once you miss one or two of them, or if like you can't get a specific issue, it's just like it throws a wrench into the fucking whole thing, And so minis are always great because it's like I just wish they weren't 5 issues. I went like, to me the perfect mini series is like 8 to 12.
Yeah, I can see that. I think 8 issues is a good length, and so is 12. To be fair.
7 to 12. Like I'm a huge fan of like 7 to 12. Like because like 4 or 5, it's like, man, there's a lot more you could have done there.
That is completely fair. So to go with that, issue 4 of The Vein came out last month, and issue 5 of The Vein comes out any day now.
Yeah.
So let's talk about The Vein a little bit.
Sure.
It's one of 2 vampire books you've done in the last.
Again, that was an accident.
Sure, it was. Yeah,
it was. I swear it was. Yeah.
It's so. We did talk in a previous episode of our podcast about the first issue of The Vein, and I talked quite at length about how much I loved that one scene where Lost gets shot in the face. It's a hell of a scene. With that in mind, what was it that inspired The Vein and the kind of different direction and the kind of jump through time periods that you've worked with? It seems like a really different kind of vampire book.
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if I can say that. That's a nice compliment. Thank you. But it's certainly a different book from me in terms of tone and things that were, in terms of tone, it's a little bit of a different book from me. It started off kind of as a joke in my head. Like all things that kind of start off as a joke, like, and by joke, I just mean like, wouldn't it be funny if this happened, like, and it's more often than not, that's a really good way for me to kind of build out an idea. It's like, a joke is a story, even if it's just like one line. And like, so the joke actually started from eating popsicles, and I ate a popsicle, and the joke on the popsicle stick was, what's a vampire's favorite kind of bank? And the answer is, of course, blood banks.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, wouldn't it be fun if there's like a sort of like Bonnie and Clyde, like blood bank robbers? And then I was like, oh, fuck, damn it. Like, and I started working on the idea, and like, as I built it out, taking it more and more seriously, and like, then playing through time, jumping through time, and like, where they go and why they go there, and so the scene with Lost at the beginning, shooting yourself in the head, to display her like both sort of fearlessness and fearsomeness. That comes from like two moments. One, it's like, I need to level up the stakes here. Like, I need to do something. I know I need to do something here. I don't know what, right? But I know instinctively something needs to happen, right? And then it's like, well, I don't want the audience to think that these people are all like bad yet, right? So like, I can't have her kill anybody unless like they're really asking for it.
Yeah.
And even then, I'm not positive I want to kill anybody in this scene. And then and then it comes also from time management. You got 22 pages, and so it's like, I need to move this shit along, right? So it's like that's some of my favorite moments in writing. It's like, I need something to happen. I need to move it along. How do I make these things like work together in a way that creates like dynamic action, or like flips the script a little bit, And those are some of my favorite moments of the creating process.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think it does. It definitely sets a tone and moves the book along in a really good way. It's been a really interesting series. I've liked it a lot. I wasn't expecting the time jumps. I'm glad they're there. I'm looking forward to seeing how everything turns out, and I've just read issue 4 today, actually. So
I forget how it ends. I don't know. But thank you.
Well, I'm sure I'll find out soon. But I think it has been a good take, and I think it's been an interesting mix of strange vampire characters and strange vampire ideas, and that's what I'm here for. It's I've talked to a lot of my friends about how Redneck is one of my favorite vampire books, at least comic wise, probably ever. And I think I just like it when people introduce different ideas to what vampires do and how they behave, how they survive, things like that. And I think the vein does that.
It's an evolving idea, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot that's carried over from classic vampire mythology opens a lot of doors for updating and seeing what you can do with it in a more modern landscape.
Even some of that stuff, even that old vampire stuff, that's taken from something else, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, all that stuff, like the idea of creatures that feed off of the life force of other people has been like an idea probably since they came up with ideas, right? Like,
probably.
Yeah.
But I did really like in issue 4, there's the one scene of Felix in his house surrounded by garlic and crucifixes, and
he's a fun character to write. He's a fun character, it's a character about obsession and like and that's fun to write, right? And it's like a lesson. It's like he's lived an entire life and like he never lived it, right? Like it's like a whole thing.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting contrast as well that you've kind of got Lost being a responsible vampire trying to keep everyone alive versus Felix losing his mind a little bit and ignoring his family to try and pursue vampires. It's
right. It's crazy though. I mean, but like, he's insane. He's driven insane not because vampires are real, but because he becomes obsessed with it, and it's like, yeah, that's why he becomes like nuts. That and a few other things. You could argue like post-traumatic stress too, and he was probably already weird.
Yeah, I mean it's a multi-layered thing. You don't just go nuts about vampires overnight. You got to build up to it.
No, yeah, it's the whole thing. Yeah.
So in contrast, and it's a very different style of book. Bleed Them Dry is due out in trade quite soon, I believe.
I'm excited for that. Yeah. So So I came up with the vein several years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and Oni Press works in a way where it's like you have to have most of the series pretty much done before they release it. And then they also had their big shakeup about a year ago with staffing, so that delayed things. So the release of them simultaneously was not optimal. But Bleed Them Dry, the Wassels in conjunction with Hiroshi, and Hiroshi's partner FJ DeSanto, approached me to write and build out Bleed Them Dry, and basic concept being ninja vampires, and they're like, we're gonna get you good art and all this stuff, and it's like, how do we do this? And that book was very challenging to work on, because it's like, how do we there wasn't Hiroshi had a lot of great ideas, but it's like, how do we turn this into a thing? And it's like, and then how do we make it not dumb, right? Like when you hear like Ninja Vampire, how do we make this like not dumb? How do we make it serious? How do we do this, right? And I don't think the answer on the flip side is incredibly dour either. I don't think you take something dumb and make it dour and all of a sudden it's good. Like that doesn't work either. Like you have to take it seriously. And so, we were thinking about it. And it's like, we blew it into the future. We blew it into the world where it's like a weird utopian, not utopian world where it's like, climate change has occurred, but it's being reversed. Like we're living in a world where there was destruction and collapse, but then it was like fixed. But at the same time, this order, also this other layer. It's like, this book took so many different shapes. So at first it was just that, and I'm talking about how we came up with the idea of the vampires are essentially these interdimensional entity. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's basically the vampires are a ruling class onto the people of Earth, and this idea of I'm obsessed with history, and it's I just listened to it today. I was listening to this great Throughline podcast about the Bronze Age, and it was talking about how the Bronze Age collapsed. The civilization itself, the entire civilization collapsed due to a series of events, essentially. And there was 100-year drought, right? And this one civilization the guy mentioned, how they forgot how to read, right? Because all of the smart people died, right? All the 1% of the population that could read died. So then nobody was able to read, and then only a generation goes by, and then nobody can read, right? And so it's that changes everything so much, and then you're only going to continue to forget, right? So it's I was working with that kind of idea, right? And the idea, and I'm obsessed with the ideas of I'm going to get really weird here. It's the ideas of fascism, right? And it's especially Nazi Germany's idea. It's the will to power, the idea of creating and forging a new reality, right? And it's and it's not even the idea of this is. It's oh no, we're just going to create a new reality, and the reality you're a part of is going to die because we're going to kill it, right? We're going to kill it with fire. And it's like, we're going to create this new reality, and that's going to be history from now on. Like, we are literally just making our own history right now through collective action and like time and destruction and war and all this stuff. And it's like, so those are all the ideas that were like percolating into it. And then that's right during when I was writing it, that was right during when George Floyd was murdered, and the riots and the protests took place, and like that only fueled those feelings like even more, because it's just a crazy time. And I mean, it still is a crazy time, but it definitely is like working with this idea that like reality is like we don't even know, like a lot of us weren't even aware that we were existing in a reality that was like bad, right? Like that's how effective like some of these power structures are, where it's like I'm always curious about the average person who lives in Latveria, right? And it's like, do they know it's bad? Like, you know what I mean? Do they know it's bad? Like, what if they like, I haven't read a Dr. Doom book in a while. I'll admit it, but it's like, how does the average person in Latveria live? Because if the average person in Latveria lives okay, right, okay to good, then what is them to assume that the world around them is bad, right? It's just like, it's like colonialism, right? It's like, take the idea. It's like, I've been watching Bridgerton a lot. Have you been watching Bridgerton?
I haven't. No.
It's crazy hot. But like, I've been watching it with my wife, and like, I can't help but think it's like, or like even with things like The Crown, right? Like even with things like The Crown, where it's like, oh, we're gonna tell a story about court life in Britain before World War One. Right. Mm-hmm. So during the great years of the empire, right? And great years, quote unquote, great years. And it's like you're dealing with this court life, and you realize that all of these people, like, they have their existence and their reality, and they think it's so normal, and they have no idea how evil it is, right? They have no idea that everything that they have and their entire structure, the entire idea of a court life, and the entire idea of like all these rules and regulations, the entire idea of like polite society is like built off of like slave labor, genocide, racism, and like all of this stuff. And it's like, I find that fascinating. Like, obviously it's awful, don't get me wrong, but like it's crazy that those two realities can exist at once. And like, that is what I think Bleed Them Dry is about. It's about a character who exists in both worlds, two characters who exist in both worlds, I should say. Yeah. But one of them is new to it, and by becoming new to it, they realize, it's like, not to use a Reddit word, but it's like, what is it, red pilling? Right? It's like, it's a very bad word, I think. But like, it's like the idea of like becoming aware and like waking up to the reality around you, right? And like realizing, oh my God, like the world that I know is actually lawful evil, and like, and that's a problem, right? But it's like, the problem with lawful evil is that it's highly organized and difficult to defeat because it's lawful, right? They create law, they create structure. Lawful evil is still culture, right? Like, just because it's bad doesn't mean it isn't powerful, right? And it's like, of course, how do we defeat these things? I didn't mean to talk about all that. So
that's okay. It's been an interesting tangent.
Yeah, but that's where a lot of that stuff came in. You know, a lot of my a lot of things that went into that book. It was a really fun, and the art is incredible. DK it's been an incredible experience. That's for sure.
No, it's a series I've really enjoyed, and I've been getting the issues digitally because when it started coming out, I'm pretty sure we were in lockdown, so it was hard for me to get the physical issues. But I'm looking forward to reading through it all in trade as well. I think it's going to be a good collected read.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
And maybe I'll, read the trade of that and the trade for the Varian back to back and get my full, vampire fill all at once.
Yeah.
Do a full vampire day, maybe.
Go for it.
Really load it up. So, moving away from vampires and horror to comedy for a moment. Slash horror, I guess.
Slash horror. Not much of a move away.
Yeah, a casual sidestep into horror and comedy rather than just...
Yeah.
So you've also got Knock 'em Dead at the moment through Aftershock, which
Correct.
is about to be 3 issues in, I think.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah, and it's 5 issues total.
Okay, so halfway point or thereabouts, which has been noticeably different than 100% less vampires, I think is...
100%. Think.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's true.
Depends on what you define as a vampire. Maybe emotional vampires.
Moving more into that Stephen King Pennywise kind of vampire.
Maybe.
So Knock 'em Dead, I know issue 2 had a lot of interviews with various comedians and kind of drew upon more of a stand-up comic. I mean, obviously issue 1 also draws on stand-up comedy. What was it that inspired the horror stand-up merging in Knock 'em Dead?
A couple things. One, I started my journey in writing by doing stand-up and being a performer. I performed for many, many years and took it very, very seriously. And I would say it was like my version of like, it was my band phase, right? Except it was stand-up, where it's like, I really thought my band was gonna make it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like I took it seriously, and it's what made me fall in love with like creating and learning how to write and stuff like that. And so, it comes from that angle, and like how horrifying it is. Like, night after night, grind after grind. The idea of doing anything with no promise in sight, believing in yourself, and not making any money while doing it. Like, that is a horror show, right? Like, right, it's a horror show for anybody. I was able to do it through stand-up, and I wanted to showcase that emotion through stand-up. I also wanted to, like, it's like the performing arts, like there's no structure. Like, there's like these places are really, like, you're gonna meet great, awesome people, and you're gonna change your life in a really great way. But if you're not ready for it emotionally, it can lead you to some really dark places, right? And it's gone there for myself, and I've seen a lot of drugs, I've seen a lot of abusers, and we see it in comics still, which is so fucking shitty, right? But being exposed to it younger and learning bad lessons from people just about like toxic masculinity and stuff like that. A lot of things like I had to unlearn. I mean, I'm 18 years old going to bars on the west and north side of Chicago, hanging out with like 30-year-olds, right? And I don't know what I'm doing here, right? And so there's that. And then there's like the fact that there's like there's just like a lot of people who aren't here anymore that should be here still, and also I think on a critical note, I went through horror because, like, one, I have a theory that horror and comedy share the same space. They're just different sides of the same coin. But also on like really practical note, most media you see, whether it's comics, television, or film, about stand-up comedy, it's largely very boring, in my opinion, and it's largely very the same, right? I wanted to tell more of a story that was in line with the sort of young artist trying to make it big, rather than it being about stand-up. Because I think a lot of people get a lot of people get tripped up on the stand-up part. They're like, oh, it's got to be funny, and it's got to be this or that, and it's like, no, that doesn't matter really, truly. And like, I walked through it through a horror lens because my experience with it was like, I mean, it's not horrific, but like, it is like, I had some horror moments that were very painful for me, and it's like, I haven't seen anybody approach it through horror really. I thought that would be a different way to walk and walk through the world of stand-up comedy without doing crashing or without doing something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's not something I've seen before, at least.
Yeah. I'm sure. I'm just like, I just can't think of anything.
Yeah. I think it is an interesting combination, and I think, not focusing on the stand-up, let's make it funny aspects of it, and working with the horror and the strangeness of trying to break into any business it's an interesting story, and I think it's a relatable story. I mean, maybe not the being haunted and nearly dying, but
sure.
Some people, I'm sure, have
still a comic book.
Yeah, you've got to have a little bit of something there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's another book that I've enjoyed from issue 1 to issue 2, and probably I'm going to enjoy issue 3, I think, is the way this is going.
I hope so.
It does feel very different than your other books. I think that's something that I have noticed. I've kind of been looking back through all of your bibliography, I guess is technically the right
sure, man.
word. It sounds very proper.
It doesn't feel.
I think there is a great deal of difference between some of the different books. So I think Knock 'em Dead stands apart from Bleed Them Dry and The Vein. I also realised when I was writing my intro for this that if you say Knock 'em Dead, Bleed Them Dry, it sounds like a kind of movie tagline from the 80s.
Oh, yeah, right.
Which appeals to me in a way, I guess. But I do enjoy the variety, and I think it's interesting seeing the horror books you've written, because I always thought that when you were working for Valiant, particularly when you were doing the one-shots, that there was quite a lot of heartfelt emotion behind those books.
Mm-hmm.
Which is it not that there isn't heartfelt emotion behind the thing since, it's just it seems like an interesting journey into horror via comedy and the different ways we've come. I always think that so the Archer and Armstrong one shot you did for
that's actually my favorite, the Escape to the Gulag story.
Yes, yeah, that's one.
That's my favorite story I've ever written, actually.
That I can agree with that. I think it's a really good single issue. It is my favorite part of the whole Stalinverse Divinity 3 story arc, I guess, event. Not sure what it falls under.
You know how fun it is to try it to because they gave me 1,000 of those one shots. Like they gave me like an unreasonable amount of those single issue one shots, and I can't sell them at a certain point. I give them away because do you know how hard it is to explain the idea of what is happening to people? Like I have to explain the Stalinverse, and then I have to explain Archer and Armstrong, and then I'm like, and now it makes sense.
I hadn't thought about it because I came at it from like having read more Valiant, so it made. Sure. I was going to say it made sense. I'm not sure it makes sense, but it still
makes sense if you know what the context is.
Yeah, the context definitely helps a little bit. Yeah,
but, otherwise it's just whatever. But I love that story. I do love that story. It's a huge turning point for me.
And like I say, it's one of my favorite Archer and Armstrong issues. It's definitely one of my favorite, I think, standalone issues. I always like that you managed to kind of capture the Archer and Armstrong relationship in an alternate universe in a single issue, and I think that's really well done. Which made me want to ask, like, how did you find it, and what was the challenge of trying to explore like a different Archer and Armstrong whilst capturing classic I say classic Archer and Armstrong. It's hard to say what classic Archer and Armstrong is, I guess.
Yeah, it's true. Eska, yeah. One, they're Archer and Armstrong are great characters, right? And they have such a clear relationship and identity that, like, and sort of, they have such a clear. They each have such clear identities to where if you what was the Marvel book Neil Gaiman wrote? 1492, 1407, 1609?
1609, I think, or
1609.
It's 16 something.
I can't remember it, even though I just reread it.
1601?
1609, I think, sounds right.
It's 16 something.
16 something. But it's just like, or like House of M, or like whatever, right? And like, where it is such a classic thing in comics to where it's like, oh, something weird happened, and like they're all the same, but it's different because of this thing now, right? So it's like, that's such a classic thing in comics that I've always liked, but it helps to be done with Archer and Armstrong because they have such clear identities as characters, right? They are very clear identities. One's a religious assassin and the other one's an immortal warrior, right? It's pretty like, there's like, it's like nihilistic freedom versus like whatever. It's like all this stuff. And like then you have the Soviet Union, and it's like, okay, well, like immediately, it's like immediately my head is like, oh, this is a thing about religion, right? This is a thing about like faith, and then just on a personal note, it's like a really hard time. I was like going through a really hard time, right? I was like 27. A bunch of books got canceled. I was waiting tables. Nothing wrong with waiting tables, but like, I was like, I didn't have an out of waiting tables, right? I was just like waiting tables, and I'm married, and like, did I fuck my life up, right? And like, so it's like, I really wanted to like, and this was an opportunity for me to like, okay, like you're up to bat, and like, you don't know how many of these shots you have left, right? And so it's like, take it and go as big as you can with it. And like, and I was really fortunate to work with Warren Simon, and he has been a hugely developmental in helping me like craft my voice.
That's really cool. It's it is through the kind of one shots you did at Valiant that I came to all of your other work as well. So
that's so awesome.
And I know that's true of, they're not here right now, but some of my other co-hosts I know have definitely come to the other things you've done through Archer and Armstrong. And
I'm so thankful for that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's just
no,
I was so thankful for like, working with Dinesh and Warren and Honor and like all those people over there at Valiant, and like, so the opportunities they gave me were absolutely like just like insane. I was like their cleanup guy essentially. Like, I got and that became like very, very frustrating for me at a certain point, because it's like they kept putting me in these situations where like, hey, could you maybe put together another miracle for us? And I'm like, I'll try. And, and like, I have no problem saying that at this point anymore. Right.
Yeah.
Because like, I don't have a problem saying that anymore. I should own my work a little bit. I was put in some difficult situations, and I would say I rose to the occasion almost every single time. Sounds like ego. I am from the Midwest, but I am very proud. I swear to you. I worked really hard, and I tried very hard. And so did everybody who worked on those books too.
Yeah, I do agree with you though. I think there's some books where you came in as a writer and I wasn't expecting it, but you did really good things. Another example that I think I have to talk about, and I think I tweeted you at the time. So Quantum and Woody 6.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of Harbinger Wars 2 tie-in Blackout issue.
Yeah.
I was already really excited for Quantum and Woody when the 2017 series started with Dan Kibblesmith.
Yeah.
So it was already one of my favorite Valiant books was the James Asmus run, so I was really excited for it.
It's a great run. It's a great run.
It's nearly perfect, but then I think that issue 6 with the, no powers, blackout, the world's fallen apart, but they still decide to be heroes.
Yeah.
Hands down, man, the best Quantum and Woody issue.
Thanks, man. That's so nice of you. Yeah, I mean, I just like, it was just one of those things where it's like they gave me the one shot. I didn't know. I think all that was guaranteed was the 2-parter, right? 6 and 7. There was no promise for 8 through 12, right?
Okay.
And a bunch of bad stuff was happening at the time too. And like Valiant was like changing leadership left and right, right? So it's like very hectic time. But like, yeah, the fact of the matter is that like I am not funnier than Daniel, right? I'm not. Like I'm funny in a different way, but I've known Daniel for a very, very long time, and like I am not going to be funnier than him. I'm not nearly as like crafty and skilled of a writer at this point as James Asmus, and so it's like if I try to do James, it's just going to sound like I'm doing a less funny version of James, right? And so it's like, how do I just like, how do I do this? How do I do something that's totally different, right?
Yeah.
How do I do something that's totally different? And like the way I did it was just by, okay, like what if it was real? Like, what if it was real? What if everything mattered, right? And like, and that's what that story was.
Yeah, and I think that really works. I think it set a different tone that was kind of true to the characters, but very different than what had come before, and it really worked.
Yeah.
And I think from
I haven't read any of the new stuff though. I invented a fun villain, and I hear they aren't using him, and it bums me out.
Yeah, I think it's weird because obviously you start with kind of the heartfelt issue 6, the outside of reality where Woody's still in therapy and Quantum's the biggest hero in the world, and yeah, that's relatable. And then there's that. So when you get back to the real world, the Valiant world, I guess, there's the infomercial man eating the cat on the street.
Yeah.
And holy shit, man, that is a terrifying moment.
Thank you. That was fun. That was another one of those puzzle moments where I was like, what do I do? Like, what do I do? How do I make this weird?
He's got to shoot himself in the face or eat something. It's one or the other.
Right.
But that is another moment that I think sets a real tone that I don't know we would have got in one of the earlier Quantum and Woody runs. But it's probably my favorite like volume of Quantum and Woody, and I wish we had more of it. I think that's...
Thanks, man. There's a lot of stuff I'd love to do with the Valiant stuff. But yeah, it's good. It's great. They're great characters.
Yeah, and I think the world needs more Archer and Armstrong and Quantum and Woody, and I've read the pitch you put up on Patreon for Archer and Armstrong. I'm in full support of that. I think it should.
Oh man, I would have loved to have done it. I would have loved to have done it. Thank you. I would have loved to have done that, but maybe who knows? Anything could happen.
You can just kickstart it under different names.
Bowman and Barrister.
We'll see the comparison. It's it's a totally different book.
Totally different.
I do have a friend who's obsessed with like the comparison between Incredible Hercules and Archer and Armstrong, and
I see it.
I think you could do a similar thing, and no one would bat an eyelid. They'd all be fine.
Mm-hmm.
maybe not. Who knows? So. Off the back of the Quantum and Woody run, which I was clearly a big fan of, kind of led me to looking into what else you were doing at the time, which brought me to Cult Classic.
Thank you, yeah.
Which I really enjoyed, and I think, again, I probably tweeted you at the time, and I know I did a review last year. We did like a Halloween countdown thing, and I did an article on Return to Whisperers the first like day of October, which is a series that I need to know. Is there going to be more?
Could be. Depends on a couple things. It depends on a couple things, and things that are out of my control at this point. So it's like But those are fun books. I still love those books, and I still love the idea of those books. And it's like, I just love, I just wanted a place to make like fun genre horror things, and then invite other people to come create in that space too. And like, I still think it's a cool idea. I think I love both books. It just depends, right? But I'm glad you liked them. Like, those came out during a weird time, and like, that's nice. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of series that appeals to me as someone who watched a lot of kind of low budget B movie horror type stuff through my teenage years and early 20s. So right. I'm always there for more of that.
I feel you.
And I feel like you're kind of the guy to give me that sometimes, especially you got a lot of weird horror in you, it seems.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm just grasping at straws, and that's what comes out. So, but thank you.
Okay. So I did want to ask the question off the back of Cult Classic, and obviously everything else, Knock 'em Dead, Bleed 'em Dry. I can't stop saying them back to back, apparently. The more horror moments at the end of Quantum and Woody. What was it that draws you towards horror? Obviously you've talked about the comparison with horror and comedy. Have you always been a big horror fan, or?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I love horror. I don't know if I don't really set out to make horror. Like it just happens. It just really does just kind of happen. Like, I don't really set out to do it. But yeah, I love horror. And then also I'm a space cadet, right? And it's like, I'm always trying to think of like, I don't know, always playing with reality and thinking about like stuff like that. And I don't know, stuff gets dark in your mind. But like, I don't really set out to do anything. I just, the thing that I care about most, I think as a writer, is just like, compelling characters that go through like really difficult circumstances, and like like horror, I think, happens to serve that purpose more often than not.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah. So like, I don't really ever like you come, and when I say you don't set out to do it, I mean like, yeah, of course, like I know it's going to be a horror in the sense that if I come up with like, Cult Classic, Creature Features, it's a story about an asteroid that crash lands on Earth, that makes everybody weird, right? And everyone throws up their skeletons and there's zombies, and it's a lot of fun. In my head, I know that's a horror, but like, it's one of those things that's like, there's a difference between being 1,000 feet away and being up close to it. And it's like, yeah, it's a horror. Like, but like, when I'm writing it, I don't think of it as a horror, right? I'm like I'm trying to just pay attention to the characters, and trying to do something that creates a reaction.
I think that's fair, and I think that there is some good character work amongst all the throwing up skeletons and
I try
space slugs.
I try.
But yeah, both Return to Whisper and Creature Feature have been some of my favorite horror books the last couple of years. I think
that's so nice of you. Thank you.
That's all the truth, man. I think coupled with stuff like, so there's been some kind of I guess more B-movie feeling horror. There was Count Crowley from Dark Horse as well, which
I didn't read it.
I think you'd like it, man. It's definitely got a similar kind of vibe.
Like Aleister Crowley or whatever?
It's... How do I explain this without it sounding stupid? Well, it's comics. It doesn't. It's about a horror host that goes missing and then gets replaced by someone who doesn't want to be a horror host on TV.
Oh, that's fun.
And then she discovers that the guy she's replacing actually hunted monsters on the side.
Oh, that's so fun.
And it's a fun, weird, like 4-issue book, and it's pretty weird and it's pretty ridiculous, and I think
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, I think you'd definitely enjoy it. It's by David Dasmalchian, the actor / writer / comic book man, apparently. But it's definitely worth checking out, especially if you're into weird, wacky horror stories, which
I'll give it a shot.
I think you might be.
I can be. Otherwise, it's either I really like them or like I don't like. I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fair. So when you've mentioned kind of characters, coming up against insurmountable odds, such as we see through Cult Classic, I hadn't thought about it, but that is definitely a theme that we see through, Hot Lunch Special, Midnight Vista, The Doorman. And man, I've just realized how many books I haven't talked about that I could, but I don't want to keep you here forever.
I know. I got to order dinner. And that's all. I mean, honestly, though, that's like a whole different phase in my career. Like when you're talking about The Doorman and the paybacks. I love that stuff. Great part of my career. But like, there's very much a difference starting around Gulag where I approach things differently. And, I mean, I'm thankful for that,
And don't get me wrong, I'm all for it. I think Gulag and Quantum and Woody, everything from that point onwards, I've really loved. And it's been interesting going back to read Doorman, which was really hard to get in England.
I guess it was hard to get everywhere.
Okay, right. That makes it so much better then. I had to buy a second-hand copy off of Amazon, and I had to buy it. Came up in the middle of the night, and I had to buy it like straight after.
That's great.
But it's a book the world deserves more of. Similar with Paybacks, I think I bought it from D. Cunniff at a con a couple of years ago. So
that's great.
So, in the effort to, let you go and have dinner and not keep you here forever, as much as I could do, I'm sure, I wanted to ask one final question to kind of wrap us up, which is, what have you been reading at the moment, and what would you recommend in comics or outside of comics? Or
yeah, good question, man. My brain has been bad lately, so it's been hard to keep focused. But fiction-wise, I've been reading the Broken Earth trilogy from N.K. Jesman, who I just realized is writing Far Sector, and I have no idea.
Okay, that's cool.
And I've been wanting to pick up Far Sector forever, but it was one of those things where I couldn't get the first issue forever. And then by the time it was like I missed it, I have to go wait for the trade. Right?
Yeah,
I just have to wait for the trade. Because NK's work is great in the Broken Earth trilogy, and so I'm very excited now, even more excited to read Far Sector. Currently, I need to catch up on Immortal Hulk. Comics wise, though, I'm reading Scumbag, Rorschach, which I've been enjoying those series. And then I just bought a whole bunch of fucking comics too. And then I just bought like Jimmy Olsen's Superman. And then I've got all my other comics here, and then trying to finish off Akira. So I'm kind of all over the place right now, if I'm honest with you. I'm not very organized.
It's a hard time to be organized. I've got to give you that.
Yeah.
That's a good selection of books, though. That's also true.
Slow reader.
Yeah, I think I have a ridiculous amount of books I've bought and not read. So
and then it's like also like, I don't know what you do for a living, but it's just like we're staring at screens all day, and sometimes I just don't want to like look at anything, right? Like
I feel you.
All right.
I see computers way too often, and it's nice to take a break.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a nice place to wrap up. Thank you for talking with me today. It's been a lot of fun, and like I say, we can always do a part 2 if you want to talk about all the other books at some point.
I'll come back on whenever you want me to come back on, when you find it appropriate. So you can always reach out. It's fine. Might not get back to you right away every time, but I'll do
of course. It's been really good talking to you, and I feel like I should do some plugs so people can find you on Twitter and Instagram at Eliot Rahal. And Great Lake Novelties on Patreon.
I'm doing some changes. I came up with like a new strategy. I'm very excited. You'll see it rolled out soon.
I'm looking forward to seeing what's to come. Definitely.
Yeah, it's going to be different. It's going to be a big gamble. So we'll see how it pays off.
Okay, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to seeing what's what.
Yeah, man.
Right.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So thank you for joining me.